Welcome. This lecture will help us better understand how to complete the programming projects in Chapter 3. I'm going to go over the first program project in Chapter 3, the calculator. We'll do it step by step so you can get an idea of what I'm expecting and how I would suggest you go about solving the problems. So just starting from scratch, we have a picture from our book here, Chapter 3 Programming Projects. First one is a calculator. It says write a program that allows the user to specify two numbers, then it adds, subtracts, or multiplies them when the user clicks on the appropriate button. The output should give the arithmetic operation performed and the result. So it says see the figure. Note, when one of the numbers in an input box is changed, the output text box should be cleared. So whenever we change a number, it should clear it. So again, we have an outline of a Windows form. Up in the title bar, it says calculator. We have a label there that says first number and a text input box that has a number in it. Has three buttons, one that's an addition, one that's a subtraction, one that's a multiply. We have a second label that says second number, text box there that allows for input. Down at the bottom we have a read-only text box. It shows the number that's in the first number box, the arithmetic operator that was selected, the number that was in the second box, an equal sign, and then the actual arithmetic operation performed. So again, back in chapter 2, we talked about how we design programs and how we solve them. And one of the options that we can use is a flowchart. So here is a flowchart for our problem. So we have our start. We have input from the user, which is going to be our first and our second number. That's our two input text boxes. Then we're going to have a decision that we need to make. What button are they clicking? Based on the button that they're clicking, it's going to perform the arithmetic operation, which is, again, is a computation that the computer is going to do. Then it's going to display the out box in a read-only text box, and that's the end. So that's the basic flow chart for that problem. Again, we can also look at it from a hierarchy chart. We have our calculator program. We're going to get some input. We're going to perform a function. Our input is going to be our first and our second numbers. Our function is either going to be add, subtract, or multiply. And again, that's dependent on the button that's clicked. It's going to perform that function. Based on the input that's entered, it's going to perform our entire calculator program. And lastly, we could do it in pseudocode. If add's clicked, our text out is going to be our text first, concatenated with the plus sign, concatenated with our second number, an equal sign, and then a double value of the text first plus the text second. If minus is clicked, our text out is going to be our text first, concatenated with a minus sign, concatenated with the second number, an equal sign, and then a C double of our text first minus our text second. If multiply is clicked, our text out equals our text first, concatenated with the multiply sign, concatenated with our text second number, an equal sign, C double, text first times text second. And then if text first dot enter or text second dot enter, so that they're gaining the focus, somebody's entering in a new number, our text out box is cleared. So again, the pseudocode is really close to Visual Basic. That's almost what our code's going to look like when we get to program it. It kind of captures the information, but it also is kind of readable so we understand what the program's doing, how the program's going to work. So after that, we're going to go into Visual Basic and actually lay it out here. So let's open up Visual Basic. Again, it brings us to our welcome screen. In our welcome screen, we can either go File, New Project, or under Start, we can do Start New Project. It's going to ask us what type of project that we want to start. Obviously, we're working still with Visual Basic. All of our programs in this are going to be our Windows Form application. Our name I'm going to change here to be Calculator. And hit OK. That's going to load our Windows Form application. Creating the project. So again, now we're back to our basics. We're in our form designer window. We have our form up in the upper left-hand corner. Our form's blank. We need to add some information to it. So I'm going to view my toolbox because my toolbox is going to contain all of the functions here that I'm going to use. I want to make my toolbar floating here so I can see my form window at the same time. So I'm just going to click on it and drag it over here. So again, if we go back to the picture of what it looks like when it's done, we can see our form. It's going to have a label, says first number, a label says second number, 2 text boxes, 3 buttons, and then an output text box. So we can take our buttons. Again, there's multiple ways to do this. I'm just going to use click and drag. I'm on a touchpad. I apologize for it looking a little funky as I'm dragging it over here. Okay, then we're going to have a couple labels. Again, you can double click, enter those labels in here. And again, you can use the snap lines and you can make it pretty. I'm less concerned with it being pretty. This isn't a Photoshop class, so I'm just trying to make sure you understand the basic functionality rather than care about the overall design. It does have to function. It does have to look like it does in the book, so be aware. Lastly, text boxes. Again, we're going to have a text box at the bottom. Text box under our first label. And a text box over here. So now we have our basic design here. It's got all the elements that we're going to need in order for it to function. I'm not going to need to add anything else, so I can make my toolbox go away here. Now, the next important key is to actually give our labels our name and convention, give our buttons our label and convention, and make sure everything's labeled appropriately. So our label, going down to have a name. This is going to be LBL for label. Again, this is the label for the first number, so we can call it label first. The text in that should be first number. Again, we can go back and look. It says first number with a colon. Colon doesn't really matter. So, and we know that auto size is on, so it's automatically going to adjust the label to fit there. We can turn auto size off. So auto size to false. That'll let us drag the label out to have 2 lines. Our second label, going to follow the same thing. Name, LBL. This time it's going to be second. Text. Second. Number. Colon. Auto size to false to allow us to size it how we want it. Okay, then we go and we label our buttons. Again, the button name, BTN. And then we know that the first button, again, we look back at our assignment. First button is the addition. So BTN, add. Then our text for button 1, simply going to be the plus sign. And again, we can change the fonts, we can change the brightness to make it stand out. Again, I'm not overly concerned with that, how it looks, the aesthetic versions. Button 2 is going to be minus. Again, change the name, BTN minus. Third button is multiply. Change the name, BTN mult. Text, multiply symbol. Again, you can use the X if you want. I use the star because the star is the actual arithmetic operator within Visual Basic that will do the multiply. Then what's left is our text boxes. So again, we're going to label our text boxes. TXT. This is going to be our first text box. txt second. Come down here, txt, and this is going to be our output, so I'm just going to call it txt out. We also know with our output box that we want it to be read-only, so we have to go to the read-only property and change read-only to true. So read-only from false to true. That grays it out, doesn't allow the user to type into that. We can also go to the form, rename it calculator, or FRM calc. Okay, and that's the basic layout of our Visual Basic program. So now we've done all of the Visual Basic layout elements. That's how it's going to look to the user when we run the program. Of course, if we run the program now, as you can see, it will compile the program. It will display it just like that. Users can type numbers into the boxes. However, when they hit on the buttons don't do anything. So we haven't programmed any code yet. We've just done the layout. We've just done the design. So now we want to go to the code. So how do we get to the code? So we can select any of the options that we want, and then we can click on the arrow here to change the event functions, or we can just double click on the button and it will bring up its default button. So I'm going to double click on the plus. You notice our form calculator comes up. Now we have a private sub function that's built there. It says button add click, handles our function, button add dot click. So what happens when somebody clicks on the plus button? What do we want it to do? So we want our text output box, again, txt out. And you notice IntelliSense immediately pops up and says, oh, you're typing something that I understand. Dot text. So that's going to be what's written in our output text box. And what do we want that to be? We want that to be equal to our text box first dot text concatenated with, again, we're talking the add function here, so a plus sign, concatenated with text second dot text, again, so what's written in the second text box, concatenated with an equal sign, concatenated with C double of text first dot text plus text txt second dot text. Okay. Then we go off. We see nothing's underlined, so nothing's calling out any specific errors at this point. So let's go ahead and start our program. So if we type something that we know in the first text box here, and our second number 1, and we hit the add button, see 1 plus 1 equals 11. So that's not correct. So there's an error in our program. There's an error in our logic. So now we have to go back and see what our error is. So if we come back here and we say it's adding text first and text second. So text first is going to be the number 1. Text second is going to be the number 1. But we haven't really converted them to numbers. So let's try changing it this way. Adding C double text2.text. And then put parentheses around it like this. So now we're converting text 1 to a double value, converting text2 into a double value, then adding the two values together. Let's try that in our program. Go back here, 1, 1, hit the add. 1 plus 1 equals 2. So now we have our results. So now we know that that function is correct. Again, we haven't implemented subtract. We haven't implemented multiply yet. So those functions aren't going to work for us yet. So now we come back here. We know that this is correct. Go back to our form designer. Double click on subtraction. Well, what's subtraction? So we're going to copy this line of text. Paste this line of text, and what are we going to change? So instead of addition, we're going to do subtraction. Instead of addition, we're going to do subtraction. Now we're going to test our program. Go back in. So notice how I'm testing after each step. You don't really have to test after each step if you don't want to. You can go in and program more lines of code. For troubleshooting purposes, I do it one line at a time. That way I know if I've made an error that it'll change it. So plus 2 plus 1 equals 3. Subtraction 2 minus 1 equals 1. We're still doing all right. Again, haven't implemented multiply yet. Go back into my form designer, double click on multiply. Take my line of code again, copy it down, change my subtraction to multiplication, start my program back up. 2, 1, addition 2 plus 1 equals 3. 2 minus 1 equals 1. 2 times 1 equals 2. So we have our program functioning with the basic functionality that we need for our program. So what was the other requirement that we needed to add to our program? We wanted anytime we clicked into a box that it would update it. So now I show first number is 21, but my output text box is still showing 2. So we need to go in and fix that. So we'll close out of the program here, come back to our form designer, double click on our text box, brings us into textFirst.textChange, textFirst.textChange. So now I'm going to take my programming knowledge and know that if I'm going to do something to text box 1 if the text box is changed, I'm going to do something to text box 2. So I can add a comma in here and add text second dot text changed. So now I'm going to have the same function if text box 1 or text box 2 is changed. And what am I going to do? Text out dot text dot clear. Oop, text out dot clear. Now I'm going to do 21. Sorry, 2 and 1. Addition 2 plus 1 equals 3. 2 minus 1 equals 1. 2 times 1 equals 2. Come back in here, change the text. Notice as soon as I change it, my text box output is cleared. Plus, minus, multiply. Everything's working exactly as I pictured it. Everything's working exactly how I want it. Now my program is done. So now, when we start to work on larger programs, we'll want to come back in and start to comment our code. Again, you can comment your code by adding sign. This function adds the first text box with the second. This function subtracts the second text box from the first. This function multiplies the first and second text box. Again, as you're learning to program, you may find it more helpful to do your comments while you're doing your code so that when you come back to it later, you'll know what your code's trying to do. This function clears the output when the inputs are changed. And again, it's always good measure to compile your code one last time after you've added or made any changes to make sure it's still compiling correctly. Again, I start it right up, comes right up, everything's working correctly. So that's that. So that's how you do project one. Again, that's the beginning to the end of the solution. Hopefully it made sense to you. Hopefully my logic made sense to you and I wasn't jumping too much. If you have any questions, please definitely reach out to me and let me know. Finally, when you're going to submit the projects, I want you to submit your entire application window. The easiest way to do that is if you go to your project location. Again, if I go to open project, it's going to show where that's, or I'm sorry, if I go to open file, it's going to show where that project is. So I can copy that, go into Windows Explorer. Oops. Windows Explorer, open up that file location, not Internet Explorer, Windows Explorer. Go into File Explorer, open up that location, take a step back into Projects. You see my project calculator is there. If I right click on it, send to, and then do compress zip file, it will automatically zip that file for me. Now I have my entire application directory, and this is the file that I want you to upload to CM Connect. Again, it should be labeled with the name of the project. In this case, I called it calculator. If you want to rename the zip file after that, that's fine. But within the zip file, it will contain all your Visual Basic files, and I'll be able to compile and run your code. Again, if you have any questions on that, please feel free to let me know as well. The book actually talks about how to save those locations to some other locations so you don't have to search for them like I had to. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I hope you do well. Let me know if you have any problems. Thanks.